I've watched hours of videos across all of YouTube to determine the absolute best tips and tricks for applying body filler and Bondo to panels. I've used each of those tips and tricks on my 1981 Jeep CJ5 project here, and I'm here to bring you the absolute best things I have learned throughout my entire journey in one action-packed video. Now, the best way to share all of this with you is through doing. So we are gonna take some time, we're gonna restore this entire cowl piece here and get it back to 100% perfection. We're gonna have to use some block sanding, guide coat, body filler, and I'm gonna explain this entire process to all of you from start to finish. So make sure to stick around till the end to see this entire piece completely restored. And then at the end of this video, I'm gonna give all of you my #1 biggest pro tip that I would recommend if you're trying to take on a project like this yourself. This will be an awesome video. Let's get at it. Now, the first thing that really confused me was Bondo versus body filler. Bondo and body filler are used interchangeably for the most part, but Bondo is actually a brand of body fillers. You can get tons of other brands. I have Fastline here that I got from Sherwin-Williams Automotive. It works just as well, but when you're searching online, just assume Bondo body filler, they're probably talking about the same thing. Pro tip #1 here, keep a clean working environment. When I was first working with Bondo, it got everywhere. It would dry, it would crust over, completely ruin my working space, and all those little bits of solid get in the Bondo when you're trying to spread it on panels, and it just makes everything worse, which is definitely not an easy task. When you're working with Bondo, you're sanding it down, you're gonna get dust everywhere. Your workspace is gonna be destroyed, no doubt about that. My garage is never coming back from this one. Now, when you're taking a project on like this, you're gonna need a ton of different pieces of equipment. Having the right tools for the job really make it so much easier. Air files, block sanders, cheese graters, sandpaper, little mixing sheets, all this stuff I'm putting in links in the description if you wanna check it out. Pick up some of the stuff for your project. Now, I want to go over some of the foundational items that need to be complete that I've already done here. You really want to strip down all the paint that is there. Make sure there's a nice bare metal surface to adhere stuff to, because you want your body filler going on a very clean, a very solid foundation. If you put body filler on existing paint that hasn't been prepped, sanded, or cleaned, it's just gonna fall off, it's gonna crack, it's not gonna stand the test of time. I watched one video by another YouTuber that does like $60,000 paint jobs. I'll link the video down below in the description. It was crazy helpful, but he always said primer first, then body filler, so that way there's a moisture barrier there and moisture can't get behind the body filler directly to the metal. Now, with the surface prepped with high fill primer, the next thing we're gonna do is guide coat and block sanding. This is my guide coat right here, but it is available in a spray or a powder. I've seen most people use the powder, so that's what I went with. It seems like it'll last a really long time. There's tons of powder, and this stuff is nasty. It'll get everywhere, so be careful with that. They say not to use spray paint as guide coat because it'll clog your sandpaper. One thing I learned, which was pretty cool, high fill primer is actually way more sandable than regular paint, so it doesn't clog sandpaper as quickly. You're gonna be doing a lot of block sanding, so that saves a lot of time. Now, the purpose of the guide coat is to reveal any highs and any lows that may be present in the panel. Now, I'm just gonna use some circular motions here. There's really nothing special. You just wanna coat the panel. This is definitely the easiest part of the job. So once we start block sanding this panel, you're gonna see some highs, you're gonna see some lows. At first, that really confused me. I was like, how do you see the highs? How do you see the lows? It's so shiny, how do you determine it? Well, this takes all the guesswork out of that. And I'm gonna show you exactly what that means, exactly what that looks like. So let's take some time, let's get this baby completely coated, and then we'll take a look at block sanding and what I mean. Now that the cowl is completely covered in guide coat, let's talk block sanding. Now, when someone talks about block sanding, they're talking about all these different blocks that are available. Different blocks do different parts of the job. So you have flexible blocks like this that are really good for curves. Stuff like this over here. Long blocks like this one are really good for long panels on the Jeep that you really want to get razor straight. And then you have some skinny blocks that maybe fit into other areas your big blocks don't. Now, we do need to mention my air file here. This thing is not required, but it saved me hours and hours of time. I ended up unboxing it and testing it in a previous video. I'll link to that in the description. It's definitely game changing. And I would say as a beginner, it got me out of some rough times when I just put on too much body filler. It sanded it all off super fast. I also want to mention the cheese grater here. These are super cheap and they'll save you so much time. If you have too much body filler on a panel, you can use a cheese grater to knock it down, and that results in a ton of time saved sanding. Plus, you get all these cool little shredded cheese body filler sections. All right, are y'all hanging in there? We talked guide coat. This you put on the panel, gives you your highs and lows. We talked our blocks, different sized blocks for different jobs. We talked about our air file, our cheese grater. Now let's talk about sandpaper. One thing I didn't realize, this sandpaper connects to all the blocks and even the air file with a sticky back, which kind of stinks. Once that stickiness comes off, you're done. So keep it clean, keep it safe from getting on stuff. It comes in these giant rolls and you kind of just peel the back. And these rolls aren't too expensive. I think maybe 20 bucks per roll. As you can see, I've got a few stacks here. I would invest heavily in 40 grit, 80 grit, and 120 grit. So now that you're a complete expert in blocks and the sandpaper, let's go ahead and block sand out this panel. I wanna share a few tips that really help change the game. We need to select what block we wanna use for this application. As you can see, it's very curved. Even up here, I'm not sure if I see any completely flat, completely straight part. When I was doing the sides of the Jeep, I was using a very straight, very flat block. But I think up here, I'm gonna end up using a flexible block just to keep these curves preserved. So let's come over here and figure out what we want. This one looks pretty good here. Now, although I'm doing the panel up here, I did want to give you a huge pro tip here, something I learned very early on. And that is when you're doing a panel like this, you want to do X patterns. You don't want to just go in one direction. You're going to end up with lots of highs and lows above it. So you want to really get a good 45 degree. You're going to get a much straighter panel in the end. I'm not sure how much X pattern I can get going on this puppy, but with all these steep curves like this, I'm just going to have to hit it how I can. Now I am going to use 80 grit paper here to sand out my guide coat. I found that works best. 40 grit works really, really well when you're working in your body filler. So we'll get to the 40 grit eventually, but right now, let's hit that guide coat and start sanding with our 80 grit. Pro tip number 2, always wear a mask when you're doing any type of sanding. This stuff gets everywhere and you do not want to be breathing it. Now when you're sanding your guide coat, you really want nice, light movements. You want the pad to glide over the surface of the task. If you're pushing really, really hard, you may not notice dents and other things versus just keeping it light and hitting it. It's really going to reveal those dents and low spots. So check this out right here. You see this low spot? There's a lot of black guide coat still left. But you can see in the corner it got sanded away. So this looks like a little bit of a dip here. I'm gonna keep sanding though, because I can keep sanding until I hit metal or etch primer, which is underneath our high fill primer. So this may sand out in the end. Let's keep attacking it and see where this panel is in a second. All right, the block sanding's done. Let's take a closer look and see what we got. This is exactly what I'm talking about right here. These are 2 small dents where our guide coat really got down in there. It made it dark, and then our sandpaper glided right over the top. Look how easy it is to spot all your low and high spots immediately. But rest assured, I didn't make this whole video just for these 2 tiny spots. Let's look at the other side. It is gnarly. Yes, this is pretty nasty. I think this is a great example of how we're gonna use our body filler to fill it all in. Now, when you apply your body filler, you want a clean foundation, just like we talked about. It's more of a leveling compound, not to fill massive holes. Now, professionals are gonna be able to go in and beat some of these dents out, maybe pull them out, get it as level as it possibly can, then they'll apply their body filler. But I think we're just gonna go over the top. This one is not absolutely terrible, and it's just gonna save me so much time, but I do wanna punch in a little closer. Can everyone see the silver right here? See, nice and dark. This is normal. That silver is where it sanded through the primer. So these are high spots. So in this one little area, we have high spots, low spots, and regular spots. So we're gonna have to knock down these high spots with our hammer a little bit. Then we can go ahead and think through how we're gonna apply our filler. This is the nastiest. This is the most ugly. So we're gonna use this as our main example here for mixing body filler, applying it, sanding it, and making this baby perfect. Now this hammer came with a hammer and dolly set. You're supposed to use these blocks to kind of mold the panels. If they're all dented, all gross, you can mold them back to a curve or straight or whatever you want. Now, big pro tip here, do not go crazy and start hammering on the body, pounding it way deep in there. You only need it just the littlest bit so the sandpaper isn't catching directly on it. I used to hit it way too hard, went way too deep, and made more of a dent to take care of. So you really want just little hits here. All right, I can feel right there, it went the littlest bit in. Now we have those high spots taken care of, we can work on our body filler. Whenever you're working on a project like this entire panel, I would focus on little bits of progress at a time. I've gotten completely overwhelmed trying to do an entire panel at once, doing little body filler here and there. It's drying, it's chipping, it's falling off, it's terrible, and it's frustrating. Don't do that. You're just gonna stress yourself out. Focus on one little small section at a time. So we're gonna focus on this section right here, apply our body filler, sand it out, and we should be good to go. Now, when you're applying your body filler, you want to make sure to mark the section around where you want to place your filler, because we're going to want to sand away all this guide coat here to give it a good clean surface to stick to, and then you won't see where any of your dents are. So here's a quiz for you all at home. Which one are you going to use to mark your circle? It should be your pencil. I've used Sharpie on my Jeep here, and it's worked out well, but some other advice that was listed online was to use a pencil because the marker could potentially bleed through on different paints and stuff that you're painting over the top. So use a pencil if you can. All right, I got my pencil mark here. Noticed I went pretty wide around all these dents. You don't want to do it just inside where you could miss a spot. Now, I have another huge pro tip I want to share with you all. Whenever you're doing body filler and Bondo, it's probably going to take multiple tries to get right. I may not sand it out perfectly the exact first time. I may guide coat it again, sand it down again, and have whole sections that I missed. And that's okay. It's going to take multiple tries. I've seen professionals on YouTube channels 2 and 3 different tries to get it completely flat and get it completely straight. And in my opinion, it's easier to do a couple different attempts than it is to do one big one and have a horrible time trying to sand it out. So let's go ahead and grab some 80 grit sandpaper and finish out sanding out all this guide coat. You don't want any of this darkness here or else it's not going to stick well. All right, this is a do as I say, not as I do moment. One of the professionals I watched said to always wear rubber gloves when working with your project. That way you're not getting grease all up into here from your hands and other things. Because using wax or grease remover on your surface before you apply your body filler could seep into existing body filler if it's already there, and it takes forever to dry and leaves behind kind of a greasy residue. Before I mix my body filler, I have to clean up the desk. Let's clean it up in 3, 2, 1. Ah, look at all that. All clean. Clean workspaces work so much better. All right, so this sticky pad has been amazing for this project. When you're done mixing your body filler, all you have to do, pull up at the corner here and pull off your entire page, and you're ready to mix your next batch. It's so convenient and so awesome when you have to mix up multiple batches. I used to use a glass pad and have to scrape it off every time. I spent so much extra time during cleanup that really wasn't needed. Now, if you do get some grease and other stuff on your body, or if you're going direct to metal, you will want some tar, wax, and grease remover. Use 2 rags. It's very important. 1 rag to put the product on, 1 rag to pull it off. It makes a huge difference because otherwise it'll leave behind a greasy residue. All right, I got my fresh mixing pad ready here. What you're gonna need is a mixing tool, your hardener, and then have your application pads here at the ready. The minute you start adding in this hardener, the clock is going to start. You want to get it mixed up and put on the car as fast as possible. So first thing I'm going to do here is glove up. Got some nice thick gloves here. Once you get this stuff all over your hands, it's so hard to get off. Now, I always accidentally mix way too much than I need. So I've been trying to cut it in half, go a little bit less. You really don't need a ton. And remember, you can always go over it a second and third time to get it right. So let's grab our first little glop here. That was a pretty big section, but I'll probably just start out with this one piece here. When you're adding your hardener, the professionals are literally weighing it out by the gram. I don't have a scale. I don't want to go through that hassle. So I'm just gonna put a little bit here. They usually say do a little line. Once you play with it a little bit, you'll discover kind of the good ratio that you want. Sometimes I go a little bit lighter just to make sure it doesn't harden up too fast, but get ready to make mistakes. There was one time I put way too much hardener into it, and it was pretty much hardened by the time I put it on the car. So I had to scrape it off, try again, and that's where you just gotta keep at it. It's really hard to completely mess up a project where it's not salvageable. It's just gonna cost you more time sanding and probably money buying more body filler. So I got my hardener in there. I'm gonna start mixing it up immediately. There's different techniques to mix it. Like they usually say, I think do it like this, try to avoid getting air bubbles into it because that's just gonna make it so it doesn't lay down as well. So you'll kind of pick it up. You really want all of the hardener, you want all the blue out of the mixture here. So I got most of the blue out of it. So I have it pretty well done here. I have a pretty big area over there that I'm trying to float out. So I'm gonna grab my big application pad right here. You can buy these on Amazon. I bought a whole pack for like $10. Definitely get a bunch of them because they get dirty and they get really hard to clean. So having a big pack of them will definitely help. So I'm gonna grab my application pad. We're gonna bring it right over to the project here. And then I'm gonna start to float it out over my dents. So I'm gonna grab my little section here. And then the first little go, I wanna push it really hard, really get it into all those nooks and crannies. I have a really big section there I gotta take care of, so I'm gonna put a little bit of a glob there, just kind of try to form it over. All right, that looks like a really good first attempt. Again, I did not get this entire hole done all in one swipe. I'm gonna come back and hit this probably 2 or 3 more times to make sure it's totally flat. Let me bring back my pad here. Now you wanna start these cleanup steps immediately. Everything's scrubbed down with brake cleaner so it's all nice and shiny. Now there's a few things you can do while it's drying. Number 1 is clean up any that you don't want. If you get this stuff into nooks and crannies, it is so hard to get out. Scrape off any sections that you don't need, and then once it hardens even a little bit more, you can start cheese grating. So I'm gonna grab my razor blade here, and we're gonna clean up this edge right here. Just kinda comes off here. I'm not pushing hard, it's just falling right off. Now, knowing when to sand is kind of a thing. You could wait for it to be completely dry, wait 30, 45 minutes till it's rock hard. But one of the videos I was watching said if you hit it right before it's really, really hard, when it's still a little soft, it won't clog your sandpaper. It'll actually cut away way, way easier. So I'm gonna do some cheese grating now. Watch this. Look at that. You can kind of mold it to what you want. This will save you so much time sanding. Right here, there's a huge bump up, which I don't think I really wanted. Look at all that material coming off. That would have taken me so long to sand. Now I can come in here and sand it out, and it should sand out a lot nicer. But look at that, looking so much better. I ended up going to a longer block just to span the edge here and really float out the middle. I was afraid if I used that small block, it would go too much into here because it was so bendable. So I ended up getting to some metal here, but that's okay. Mistakes get made, but we can fix it. I have a little rattle can of acid etch primer, and then I'm gonna be doing a full primer over the whole thing when all the body work's done for a final sand out just to make sure it's good to go. Now I want you to look how this looks after I was sanding. Right here, you can see these edges are feathering in. And by feathering in, I mean there's really no start or end of the body filler right here. It's just kind of feathered into one another. Compare that to like over here where you see an obvious seam. That means that this section probably has to be sanded a little bit more to become more feathered out like this. So I'm gonna keep sanding it out until this section looks like this, all the way around the whole piece, and then we know we sanded enough. So now that I've walked you through the entire process for the first time, let's go ahead time lapse this second coat and we'll see where it's at. Hopefully it looks a lot better. Sanding away our second coat of filler here, but if you ever want to do a checkpoint, just grab your guide coat, coat the area nice and thoroughly in here, get it in every little nook and cranny, and then sand it all away, and you can easily see if you still need to sand the filler or just kind of get a quick check on all the levels. I thought I had it, but obviously I didn't. I left some edges here that definitely need to be sanded down, have some more filler added, a little bit up here. But as you can see, guide coat is still useful even when you're adding your body filler. I didn't know that. I thought it was just for use on primer, but it's a really good check when you're doing your body filler just to see where your lows and your highs are to get it perfect. So round 3, fight.
One eternity later.
And this, everybody, is a successful patch. It really turned out amazing. Look at all those edges just perfectly feathered in. So stick around, we're gonna time lapse the rest of this cowl, and then I'm gonna share with you all the #1 pro tip I wish I knew before getting into this work right after that. Now that panel is absolutely done, looks absolutely amazing. I'm sure I'll still have some small tweaks to make when I do another set of primer. And if you're interested to see what happens to this Jeep, hit that subscribe button. I have so many incredible ideas for this thing. I'm going resto mod. We're gonna be lifted, black, gray, super pimped out. Now, as I mentioned before, I have one big pro tip that is gonna save you all so much headache, and that is to just keep at it. I have almost given up on this project so many times. I was so defeated and I waited till the next day. But if you're working on a project like this, please, 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 just keep at it. This cowl looks so good, and I promise you, if this was my first time, it would have taken me all day to do. Learning this stuff is so hard. It really is an art form, and there are so many just absolutely incredible people out there that do incredible work. But if you're just waiting until you're really good, you're never gonna start. You gotta start somewhere, you gotta make mistakes, so jump in there, crank on it, make mistakes, learn from them, press on, and I promise you'll start picking it up. If you found this how-to helpful, let me know in the comments below. I don't typically do how-tos like this, and I'm really curious to see how this goes. If you have any questions, please comment down below. I love interacting with my audience. Thank you everybody for watching. I truly appreciate it. See you next week in the next video.